Thanksgiving. We're going to explore today three aspects of Thanksgiving. Firstly, the first one, what we have, not just to keep, but what we have also to give away, or better still, to pass forward. The second theme in Thanksgiving is the relationships that we live in. And of course, the third aspect of Thanksgiving today is thanksgiving for the good news. Maurice is going to bring us our first Bible reading. Thank you, Maurice. As we read in Paul's letter to Philemon, or Philemon, I don't know which it is, there are people around us in this very congregation whose love has given great joy and encouragement. Actions, kind words, or someone's mere presence leads us to give thanks and our Lord's praise. And hopefully today and in the coming weeks you can hand one or more of those sheets of paper that you've been given this morning, and there are spare copies on the table down in the corner there, to thank someone in the congregation for their joy and their encouragement. I think the last time we did this some time ago, I actually still have one that was... Yes, I still have one in the back of this book that was given to me, and I hold on to that from time to time. I know from the feedback that I received that the card ministry that Sandra runs is hugely appreciated by people in this congregation. A simple word, a kind gesture, is often just what is needed and often received at exactly the right time. As we mentioned at the outset, so many of our folks need to be thanked for the work that they do in the various ministries and the outreaches of our church. So many of those are in the background rather than upfront leaders. Sometimes we don't even know who they are as they busily work away behind the scenes. The worship service, for instance, has a number of people, takes a number of people for it to all come together. And it's a testament to that truth for all of our activities, that it takes more than one people, it takes a whole body to make these activities work. You know, we may never know the impact sometimes of the work that does go on behind the scenes until one day we all meet again in glory. Every now and then, however, those who would be normally unseen cross our path to bring us a realisation that we live in a community of people, seen and unseen, doing small acts that can affect people's lives in the most profound ways. I've spoken of a book that I read recently by Mike Yaconelli called Messy Spirituality. Who lives in a life of messy spirituality? Oh, you've all got it together, eh? Fantastic. Come up here. Messy spirituality. He speaks about an incident that occurs that reminds us of things that happen behind the scenes that can hugely impact our lives. And he tells this story. During the last months of World War II, the British conducted daily bombing raids over Berlin. The bombers would take off from an airstrip in England and then fly surrounded by smaller fighter planes, whose job it was to keep the German fighters from attacking the bombers, which were easy targets. One night, after a successful bombing raid, as they were heading for the safety of England, the bombers were attacked by a large group of German fighter planes. Somehow, during the dogfight, one bomber found itself flying alone with no protection, and suddenly a German fighter appeared out of nowhere. The crew of the bomber watched as the German plane moved closer and closer until finally it was in range. They prepared for the worst and watched helplessly as tracer bullets began spitting from the fighter. Bullets whizzed by them over and under until thud, 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 thud. 5 bullets slammed into the fuselage of the bomber near the gas tank. The crew braced for the explosion, but nothing happened. They could see fuel pouring from the bullet holes, but there was no explosion. Miraculously, they were able to make it back to their base and get safely off the plane. A few hours after they'd landed, one of the mechanics showed up in the crew's barracks. He had found 5 bullets inside the fuel tanks, crumpled but not exploded. He handed them to the pilot, and the pilot carefully opened the shells, and to the crew's amazement, found each one empty of gunpowder. Inside one was a tiny wad of paper. When he unfolded the paper, he found a note which read, "We are Polish POWs, forced to make bullets in factory. When guards do not look, we do not fill with powder. Is not much, but is best we can do. Please tell family we are alive." The note was signed by 4 Polish prisoners of war. 5 tiny bullets out of millions and millions of bullets made during the war made all the difference for the crewmen of a British bomber. The power of goodness is found in the tiny. Since the beginning, God has chosen the tiny over the large. David over Goliath. Gideon and his 300 soldiers over thousands of Midianites. Elijah over the prophets of Baal. And 1 sheep over 99 sheep. Spirituality is about doing the tiny works of God, tiny little acts, small responses to God's presence in our lives. Every week my church shows me heroic acts by ordinary people who never will be recognised. How beautiful. So then, the third type of thanksgiving that we outlined at the beginning of today's service is made for Jesus, the bringer of the good news. These words, of course, you're probably aware, good news, are interchangeable with the words gospel and evangelise. I always think of the words we put together in our lives, things like gospel truth, the unqualified, non-fake truth for all, truth that indeed is good news, truth of redemption of sins, the truth of unqualified love and mercy and hope. Evangelise, or as it is in Greek, euangelon, is not the proclaiming that we read in verses 18 and 19. It's much deeper. It's about joy. It's about thanksgiving, and it's about forwarding that blessing to others. Good news, we know, is often something that is in short supply in our world, on the screen, our radios, in our newspapers, and sometimes even in our conversations. Although I must say, I don't know about you, but I watch ABC News, and I've just started to notice in very recent times a few more uplifting stories. And perhaps the news stations are saying, well, this is news as well. Good news is there. But as with our faith, we need to put on the right spectacles to look with new eyes. World Vision Australia. If you are a giver to World Vision, or if you've ever looked at their homepage or any of their mail-outs, they are quite happy to say up front, we care for the poor because we are Christian. We care for the poor because we are Christian. there are a number of charities affiliated with the Uniting Church, and a number of those do not mention the Christian imperative at all, let alone God. So it is so pleasing to see World Vision say those words, we care for the poor because we are Christian. In a recent post from World Vision, they invoked us to focus on the manifestation of Christ's good work in its work around the world. So Thea's going to put the 5 top reasons for hope in 2018. Remember this, if nothing else today. Remember that there is good news. In these 5 reasons for hope, they say this: extreme poverty is giving up ground. In the last 20 years, the number of children dying around the world from things they shouldn't, like hunger and poverty and disease, has more than halved. And the number of people living in extreme poverty, that is, on less than $2.40 a day, has dropped by over 1 billion. Let's keep that going. But it's a good start. The second point, we're 99% of the way to eradicating polio globally, and many people in this congregation will have known people who have themselves grown up with polio. With vigilance, the world could be polio-free by the end of this year. Who would have thought? And if that happens, polio will join smallpox as the only other human disease to become extinct. To become extinct. The third point, we can solve the global water and sanitation crisis within our lifetimes. About 835 children under 5 die each day from diarrhoea caused by contaminated water and poor sanitation and hygiene. But in 2015, 193 countries around the globe adopted the United Nations Agenda for Sustainable Development to achieve the goal by 2030 that there will be safe and affordable drinking water for all. The fourth, the end of the HIV and the AIDS pandemic is in sight. AIDS-related deaths have fallen by nearly half since the virus's peak in 2005, when 2 million people died from AIDS-related causes. In June 2017, over 20 million people were accessing life-saving therapies, which was almost double from 7 years earlier. The fight continues. And the final point that they make in this wonderful blog, the standard for basic education has changed from simply attending school to ensuring that students can read and write and do basic maths. Thea pointed out to me the other day the little girl who's sitting with the striped blue scarf and headgear, how beautiful she actually looks. It's a look of hope. And the World Vision, of course, is in the front of these programs that are enabling equitable access for boys and for girls, and increasing the amount of literacy for children in these countries. The job continues, it's not over, but isn't it great to see that good news that is around us every day? Amen.